The night was thick with rain. Thunder rolled across the sky, shaking the windows of the old house that sat quietly at the end of Willow Lane. Inside, a little girl named Amara lay awake in her bed, her small hands gripping the blanket as lightning flashed across her ceiling. Down the hallway, she could hear it again, her mother's sobs, soft at first, then breaking, as if every tear carried the weight of a secret too heavy to hold. Amara sat up, her heart pounded, as she turned her eyes toward the end of the hallway, where a single wooden door stood closed. That door had always been locked. Her mother had told her many times, "Never go near it, Amara. Some doors are meant to stay closed, but children are drawn to mystery." The little girl tiptoed out of bed, her bare feet pressing against the cold wooden floor. The house creaked like it was alive, like it was watching. The closer she got, the colder the air became. The sobs grew louder, mixed with whispered prayers and the sound of pages turning. Through the crack beneath the door, a faint glow flickered. Candlelight. Amara leaned closer and heard her mother's trembling voice. "Lord, have mercy. Please forgive me." Then came the sound that would stay with her forever. A metallic click, like a key turning in a lock. The light vanished, the sobs stopped, and in the silence that followed, only the rain spoke. Amara ran back to her bed, pulling the covers over her head. She never saw what happened behind that door. Not that night, not for many years to come. The rain had returned, just like that night so many years ago. The same gray clouds hung low over the small town, heavy with sorrow, as Amara stood beneath a black umbrella beside her mother's grave. The priest's voice was calm but distant, his words blending with the sound of the falling rain. Ashes to ashes, dust to dust. Amara didn't cry. She had shed her tears already. On the flight home, in the car, in the silence of the motel room where she stayed the night before. Now, as she watched the coffin lower into the earth, she felt hollow, like someone had taken the center out of her. Her mother had always been a quiet woman, private, guarded, and hard to understand. But no matter how much they'd argued, Amara never thought the silence between them would end like this. When the small crowd of mourners began to leave, Amara stayed behind. The old Bible her mother had carried everywhere sat in her hands, its leather cover worn smooth from years of touch. She brushed her thumb over it, noticing faint indentations, verses underlined, notes written in the margins in her mother's neat handwriting. It wasn't just a Bible anymore. It was a diary of her mother's soul. That evening, Amara drove to the old family house, the one she hadn't seen since college. The moment she stepped inside, the air felt heavy. Every room seemed smaller, every shadow longer. The faint smell of lavender and dust clung to everything, her mother's favorite perfume. She placed the Bible on the kitchen table and wandered through the rooms. Family photos lined the walls, faded by sunlight and time. Her younger self smiled from the pictures, bright-eyed, unaware of the hidden darkness that lived behind one locked door down the hall. The forbidden door. Even now, after all these years, it was still closed. Still waiting, Amara tried to shake off the unease. She spent the next few hours sorting through old boxes and papers, opening drawers full of forgotten memories, letters, recipes, church bulletins. Then she came across a photograph. Her mother, much younger, holding baby Amara. But there was something odd. Her mother's eyes in the photo looked haunted. Amara sighed, tracing the edges of the picture. "What were you hiding, Mom?" she whispered. Later that night, she sat at the kitchen table again, unable to sleep. The house creaked around her, wind rattling the windows. She reached for the Bible, opening it at random. Pages fluttered like wings until one stopped her hand. Psalm 51. Her mother had underlined the verse, "Have mercy upon me, O God, according to thy loving kindness, tucked neatly between the pages. Something metallic caught the light. Amara frowned and pulled it out. A small, rusted key, cold against her skin. Her heart skipped. It was old, maybe older than she was, with strange little scratches along its edges. She brought it closer to the lamp and saw faint words engraved along the shaft. "Do not forget me." Her fingers trembled. The words were both a plea and a warning. Immediately, a flood of memories rushed back. The locked door, her mother's trembling prayers, the sound of the key turning one stormy night long ago. Could it be the same key? Amara stood, her chair scraping against the floor. Her pulse quickened as she walked down the hall. The door at the end loomed before her, just as she remembered it. Its surface dark, the knob cold and still. She reached out, but stopped halfway. For years, she had promised herself never to open it. She'd believed her mother's warnings, that some doors were better left untouched. But now, with her mother gone, the silence behind that door seemed to call to her. What if this key was her mother's final message? What if behind that door lay the truth that had haunted them both? She stepped closer, pressing her ear against the wood. Nothing. Only the faint echo of the storm outside. She slid the key into her pocket. "Not tonight," she whispered, voice trembling. "Not yet." Back in her room, she placed the Bible on the nightstand beside her. It felt strange, comforting and terrifying all at once. The engraved words replayed in her mind. "Do not forget me." Amara turned off the lamp and lay awake, staring into the dark. The wind howled through the cracks in the windows, whispering like a voice from long ago. In her dreams, she was a child again, standing in that hallway. The same door, the same flickering light, the same sobs from behind the wood. And just before she woke, she heard it again. That metallic click, soft but clear, echoing through her mind. Her eyes snapped open. The house was silent, but she knew deep down the past wasn't done with her yet. The night was quiet, too quiet. Amara lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, the wind brushing softly against the old windows. She hadn't slept since finding the key. The house around her felt alive, breathing with every creak and sigh. Shadows from the trees outside moved across the walls like restless spirits. And down the hall, that door waited. The key sat on her nightstand, reflecting the pale light of the moon. Amara's eyes kept drifting toward it, her chest tightening every time she looked away. Finally, she sat up, heart pounding. "You wanted me to find it, didn't you, Mom?" she whispered. "You left it for a reason." She picked up the key. It was cold, too cold, as if it had been sitting in ice. The house groaned as she stepped into the hallway. Her bare feet pressed against the floorboards that moaned under her weight. Every sound echoed, sharp and lonely. Her pulse raced. Each step felt heavier than the last. At the end of the hall stood the forbidden door. The paint had faded, the wood chipped with age. The brass knob glinted faintly in the darkness. For a moment, Amara hesitated. The warnings of her childhood echoed in her ears. "Never go near it, Amara. Some doors are meant to stay closed." But her mother was gone now. And secrets, Amara believed, only gained power when left in the dark. She took a deep breath and slid the key into the lock. It fit perfectly. For a second, nothing happened. Then, click. The sound was sharp, final. Amara's breath caught in her throat as she turned the knob and pushed the door open. The smell of dust and old air hit her first. It was thick, heavy, untouched by time. She coughed softly, waving her hand in front of her face. The room was dim, only faint moonlight slipping through a cracked curtain. As her eyes adjusted, she froze. It wasn't just a room. It was a memory preserved in dust. A crib stood near the window, still lined with faded pink fabric. A small rocking chair sat beside it, its cushion torn but still cradling the shape of a body long gone. Old toys were scattered on the floor. Stuffed animals, wooden blocks, a doll missing one eye. Everything was still, frozen. On the wall hung a single framed photograph. Her mother, younger, smiling sadly as she held a baby in her arms. But the baby wasn't Amara. Amara stepped closer, her fingers trembling as she touched the glass. The child's face was unfamiliar, softer features, slightly different eyes. "Who are you?" she whispered. Her gaze drifted to the center of the room, where a large chest sat, covered in dust, its metal latch rusted shut. The sight of it sent a chill through her. She knelt beside it and brushed off the top. Her mother's initials were carved faintly into the wood. The latch resisted at first, but with a tug, it broke free. Inside lay neatly folded baby clothes, yellowed with age. Tiny shoes! A wool blanket with embroidered initials. N.M. Amara's breath hitched. N.M. Underneath the blanket were letters, bound by a faded ribbon, and below them, medical papers, brittle and brown at the edges. Her hands shook as she lifted the first sheet. Patient name: Naomi Matthews. Condition: congenital heart defect. Restricted mobility. Requires continuous care. The world tilted. The air left her lungs. Naomi. The name was familiar, like a whisper she had heard in her dreams. Amara's knees weakened, and she sat on the floor, surrounded by the echoes of a life she never knew existed. Her mind raced. Was Naomi a cousin? A child her mother cared for? But the dates didn't fit. The birth certificate beneath the papers stopped her cold. Mother: Grace Matthews. Children: Amara Matthews, Naomi Matthews. Born same day, Amara's mouth fell open. A twin. She had a twin. Tears filled her eyes before she could stop them. She stared at the crib, the photo, the toys, all belonging to a sister she had never met. She felt a surge of confusion and grief all at once. Why had her mother hidden this? Why had she never said a word? The silence of the house pressed around her. She could almost hear the faint echo of a lullaby, as if the walls themselves remembered. Her voice cracked. "You were here all this time." Amara picked up the photo again. Her mother's eyes in the picture looked haunted now. Not happy. There was love there, but also deep sorrow. She turned back toward the doorway, glancing down the hallway where shadows stretched like reaching hands. All those years of warnings, all the prayers, all the nights her mother cried. Now she knew why. Amara pressed her back against the wall, pulling her knees to her chest. She felt the weight of 2 lifetimes pressing on her heart, her own, and the one that had been stolen. Through blurred tears, she whispered to the empty room, "I'm sorry. I didn't know." A soft creak echoed from the rocking chair. It swayed gently. Though the air was still, Amara's tears fell faster. The house was no longer silent. It was speaking, and for the first time in years, she listened. Amara sat on the cold floor for a long time, the open chest before her like a wound that couldn't close. The air in the room was thick with dust and memory. Every sound, the ticking of the old wall clock, the faint hum of the wind outside, felt louder in the silence that followed her discovery. Her fingers trembled as she untied the faded ribbon that bound the letters together. The paper crackled like old firewood, fragile and yellowed with age. Each envelope bore her mother's handwriting, neat, steady, familiar. The first was addressed to Samuel. Amara frowned. She didn't recognize the name. She took a deep breath and began to read. "My dearest Samuel, I don't know how much longer I can carry this alone. The doctors say she won't live long, but I can't accept that. I pray every night for a miracle, for the Lord to give Naomi strength. Amara is healthy and bright, but Naomi, she can barely breathe without crying. I keep her here, in this room. No one can know." The neighbors would talk. The church already whispers. They say I'm paying for my sins. But how can a child be a punishment? She's my heart. My sin was loving her too much to let her go. Amara's throat tightened. The words blurred through her tears. She wiped them quickly, afraid the fragile ink might fade beneath her fingers. She read another letter. The nights are the worst. Naomi's coughs echo through the walls. Amara hears them sometimes and asks me who's crying. I tell her it's the wind. What else can I say? I've begged the pastor for help, but he says I must confess my shame. How can I confess love? How can I confess motherhood? Amara's heart pounded in her chest. The guilt in her mother's words was almost too much to bear. She thought of all the nights her mother sat in church, silent, head bowed, everyone thinking she was praying for forgiveness. But now, Amara understood. She had been praying for Naomi's life. She reached for the next letter. This one was written shakier, as if her mother's hands had trembled. The medicine is too expensive. I sold the piano today. The silence in the house feels cruel. Naomi's heartbeat is faint. I sit by her crib for hours, afraid to blink, afraid she'll stop breathing while I'm not looking. Amara asks why I cry so much. She doesn't remember her sister anymore. Maybe it's better that way. Maybe one day she'll forgive me for what I've done. A tear slipped down Amara's cheek and fell onto the page, darkening the paper. She pressed her hand to her mouth to keep from sobbing out loud. Her mother hadn't been cold or distant. She had been breaking quietly, holding her grief behind that locked door, hiding her pain from a world that refused to understand. She reached the final envelope. Its paper was wrinkled and stained, the ink slightly smeared, as if it had been written through tears. It had no date, no address, just one line on the front. For Amara, if she ever finds the key. Her hands shook as she unfolded it. My sweet Amara, if you're reading this, it means I'm gone, and that you've opened the door I prayed you'd never have to. You had a sister, Naomi. She was born the same day as you, but her heart was weak. I hid her from the world, not because I was ashamed of her, but because the world was ashamed of me. People said she was cursed. They told me to let her die, but I couldn't. I couldn't. I kept her close. I sang to her every night, even when the doctors said she wouldn't live through the week. I told myself that love could heal her, but love wasn't enough. The storm came the night she left me. The power went out. I ran for a candle, but by the time I returned, she wasn't breathing. I screamed until my voice broke, but no one heard me over the thunder. The fire in the hallway started from the candle I dropped. I thought I lost you too that night. I buried Naomi in my heart because I had nowhere else to bury her. The world wouldn't give her a place, not even in death. If you ever find the key, Amara, know that I never meant to hide her from you out of shame. I was trying to protect you both from a world too cruel to understand love that hurts. Forgive me, my daughter. Forgive me for my silence, for the lies, for the weight I left for you to carry. Forgiveness is your way out of the darkness. Love. Always. Mom. Amara folded the letter with trembling fingers, pressing it against her chest. Her sobs came freely now, loud, unrestrained, the kind of crying that comes when pain has nowhere else to go. Her mind replayed all those nights she'd heard her mother crying behind the door, all the times she'd felt neglected and unloved. She finally understood. It wasn't neglect. It was grief. The house that once felt cold now pulsed with a strange warmth. It was as if her mother's presence lingered, not as a ghost, but as the echo of love that had been misunderstood. Amara lifted her head, her eyes catching the faint outline of the crib by the window. The moonlight glowed softly across the small blanket still draped over it. Naomi, she whispered through tears, I'm so sorry. Outside, the wind softened. The trees stopped trembling. The house fell silent again. But this time, it wasn't the silence of secrets. It was the silence of peace slowly returning after years of pain. Amara wiped her face, folded the letters, and placed them gently back into the chest. But this time, she didn't close it. She left the lid open, as if finally the truth no longer needed to be hidden. Morning light crept through the curtains, touching the edges of the chest still open on the floor. Amara hadn't slept. The night had bled into dawn, and her mother's words still echoed in her head. Forgiveness is your way out of the darkness. She couldn't just leave things as they were. The house was full of whispers now. Whispers of a sister she never knew, and a truth her mother had died protecting. Amara stood, still in the clothes she'd worn the day before, and walked to the mirror. Her eyes were swollen, her face pale. But there was something else there, too. A quiet determination. She had to know more. She had to find Naomi's story, not from letters or secrets, but from those who had been alive back then. She began at the church. The same small church her mother had served for years stood across the field. Surrounded by withered roses and cracked gravestones, the air smelled of rain and dust. As Amara stepped inside, the old wooden door groaned open, and the scent of candle wax and thyme greeted her. Pastor Raymond was there, standing near the altar, straightening hymn books. His hair had turned gray, but his eyes were sharp, eyes that carried the weight of old knowledge. He looked up, surprised. "Amara?" She nodded quietly. "I found something. Letters about Naomi." The color drained from his face. "You shouldn't, please," she interrupted softly. "I just need the truth." The old man hesitated, then sighed. He motioned for her to sit in the front pew. His voice trembled as he began to speak. "Your mother was a good woman, stronger than most, but the town wasn't kind. When she gave birth to twins, one healthy and one sickly, people started whispering, said she'd been cursed. Some even claimed Naomi wasn't a child of God." Amara's stomach twisted. "Because she was sick? Because she was born with a heart defect," he said bitterly. "They said God was punishing your mother for her past. She tried to take Naomi to the city hospital, but we didn't have money. And the church?" He paused, guilt flickering across his face. "The church refused to help." Amara stared at him in disbelief. "You refused?" He lowered his head. "We were afraid. Afraid of gossip, of scandal. Your mother begged us for medicine. I told her to pray instead." Tears burned Amara's eyes. "You let her suffer alone," the old man nodded weakly. "And I've carried that sin every day since." Amara stood abruptly, her hands trembling. The church walls felt tighter now, as if the very air was suffocating her. She turned to leave, but stopped when she saw a small framed picture hanging near the exit. An old Sunday school photo. Her mother stood among the children, her eyes bright but tired. And in her arms, a baby. The baby had the same eyes Amara saw every morning in her own mirror. Naomi. Her knees went weak. Outside, the sky had darkened again. Clouds rolled in, carrying the scent of another storm. Amara made her way to the cemetery behind the church, her shoes sinking into the wet earth. Rows of nameless stones stood crooked, some so old the names had faded away. Her mother had written that Naomi had no place in the world, not even in death. But Amara refused to accept that. She searched the rows until she found a small, unmarked patch near a willow tree. The soil looked slightly raised, as if it had been disturbed years ago. No stone, no name, just silence. Amara knelt there, her hands pressing into the damp ground. "This is you, isn't it, Naomi?" she whispered. "This is where she laid you." A soft breeze swept through the trees. The willow branches swayed gently, brushing against her shoulders like a mother's hand. Tears welled again. "I'm sorry you were hidden. I'm sorry she had to hide her love for you." For a moment, it felt as though the whole world paused. The birds, the wind, the distant thunder. Everything stilled, and Amara felt a warmth on her back, faint but real. Maybe it was the sun breaking through, or maybe it was something more. That evening she returned home and sat by the window, clutching her mother's final letter. The sun dipped behind the trees, painting the sky gold and crimson. Amara began to write. Her own letter, her own confession. Dear Mom, I found her. I found Naomi's resting place. You don't have to hide anymore. Neither do I. You were right. Forgiveness is light. I forgive you for everything, and I hope you can forgive this town, even if I never can. Love, always, Amara. She folded the note and placed it in the chest with the others. Then she took one of the candles from the shelf, the same kind her mother used to light, and carried it to the locked room. For years, that room had been a prison of grief, but tonight it would become a place of peace. She lit the candle, placed it by the old crib, and whispered, "Rest now. Both of you." The flame flickered once, then steadied, glowing softly in the still air. Amara smiled through her tears. The shadows on the walls no longer looked like ghosts. They looked like a mother and child, finally together again. Night settled over the old house like a heavy blanket. The rain had stopped hours ago, but thunder still rumbled in the distance. Amara sat on the couch, the candlelight flickering across her face. The house was quiet, too quiet. She should have felt peace after visiting Naomi's grave, but something was still missing. There was a weight in the air, like unfinished words hanging between the walls. Then she heard it. A faint hum. Soft. Fragile. It floated down the hallway like a lullaby from another world. Her heart began to race. Amara stood slowly. The melody was familiar. She remembered her mother humming it when she was a child, just before bed. But now the voice was higher. "Younger, Naomi?" she whispered. No answer. Only the echo of that song, coming from behind the forbidden door. She walked down the hallway, her bare feet cold against the wooden floor. The air grew colder with every step. The candle in her hand trembled, its flame stretching thin. The door, once locked, once a secret, stood half open now, swaying gently as if someone had just walked through. Amara's fingers tightened around the candle. She pushed the door open fully. Inside, the room was bathed in pale moonlight. Dust floated in the air like drifting snow. And there, by the crib, was a small flickering candle that she hadn't lit. Her breath caught. The air was thick with the smell of old wood and faint lavender, her mother's perfume. And then she heard it again, a soft hum. "A child's laughter, Naomi?" The name slipped from her lips like a prayer. For a moment, nothing. Then, movement. A faint shimmer formed near the crib, the shape of a small girl, no older than 6 or 7. Her skin glowed faintly, her hair falling in gentle curls, her eyes bright but distant. She smiled, a sweet, sad smile, and reached out her hand. Amara froze. Tears blurred her vision. She whispered, "It's you, isn't it?" The little girl nodded once. Her lips moved, but her voice came not in words, but in warmth. An emotion Amara felt rather than heard. "I was never angry." Amara fell to her knees, sobbing. "I didn't know you existed. I didn't know, Naomi. The girl stepped closer, light surrounding her like dawn breaking through fog. The candle flames rose with her presence. "Mother loved us both," the warmth seemed to whisper. "She just didn't know how to save me." Amara covered her mouth, choking on tears. She tried. She begged for help. The world turned its back. The girl tilted her head, her expression serene. "The world forgets, but love remembers." Amara reached out, trembling. Her hand passed through light, but she felt something. A pulse of peace, a release of years of buried sorrow. The room seemed to come alive. The broken toys, the old rocking chair, the baby blanket, all shimmered faintly as though the past itself was exhaling. In the reflection of the cracked window, Amara saw something miraculous. Her mother, standing behind the child, not in flesh, but as a faint golden glow. Her face was no longer weary or tear-streaked. It was calm. Amara turned slowly. "Mom!" Her mother smiled gently, her voice echoing like wind through trees. "You found her." Amara's tears fell freely. "Why didn't you tell me?" "I was afraid," her mother said softly. "Afraid you'd hate me. Afraid the world would hate her?" Amara shook her head. "No, Mama. The world was wrong. You were just trying to protect us." Her mother's gaze softened. "Forgiveness was all I ever wanted. For her, for me, and for you to be free of our silence." The light around them grew brighter, wrapping the three of them together. Naomi's voice, this time clear and light, whispered, "We can rest now." The candle flames flickered once, then dimmed to a soft glow. When Amara blinked, the figures were gone. The room was still again, quiet, peaceful, whole. On the crib lay two things: her mother's worn Bible, now open to Psalm 51, and the rusted key, resting gently on top of it. Amara smiled through her tears. The house didn't feel haunted anymore. It felt healed. She whispered to the empty air, "Goodbye, Naomi. Goodbye, Mama." As she stepped out of the room, the morning light began to spill through the cracks in the curtains. The door creaked softly, but for the first time, it stayed open. The next morning, sunlight poured through the cracks in the old house, spreading warmth where shadows once lived. For the first time in decades, the forbidden door stood wide open. No longer a boundary between past and present, but a bridge between them. Amara stood in the hallway, the rusted key in her palm. It no longer felt heavy. It felt like release. She looked back into the quiet room. The crib, the toys, the Bible. Everything was still, bathed in golden light. It was peaceful now, as if the house itself had taken a deep breath and finally exhaled. A few days later, under the gentle glow of the afternoon sun, Amara stood in the small town cemetery. Two headstones now rested side by side. Evelyn Grace Mwangi. A mother's silent prayer. Naomi Grace Mwangi, a child the world forgot. But heaven remembered. It had taken Amara days to arrange this. Calls to the church, the cemetery, the few remaining townspeople who still remembered her mother. Some had been hesitant to come, others curious. But when they arrived, they stood quietly, eyes lowered, hearts uneasy. The weight of their silence, years of judgment, whispers, and neglect, hung in the air like fog. Amara stepped forward, holding her mother's worn Bible. Her voice trembled at first, but grew steady. "My mother carried this Bible all her life," she said. "Inside it I found a key. That key opened a door in our house, a door that had been locked since I was a little girl." The crowd shifted uneasily. Some looked at each other, others at the ground. "Behind that door," Amara continued, "I found my sister, Naomi. Not her body, but her memory, her story." She took a shaky breath. "My mother hid her because this town made her believe she had to. Because you made her believe her child wasn't worthy of love or belonging." Her voice cracked, but she didn't stop. "My mother lived in guilt, and Naomi lived in silence. But today, that silence ends." She opened the Bible and read softly from Psalm 51, the same passage her mother had marked long ago. "Create in me a clean heart, O God, and renew a right spirit within me." The wind stirred through the trees, gentle and forgiving. When she finished, the small crowd bowed their heads. Tears glistened in more than a few eyes. An old woman stepped forward, Mrs. Adu, one of her mother's church friends. Her voice was soft. "We were wrong, Amara. We judged what we didn't understand." "May God forgive us." Amara nodded, tears falling silently. He already has. Weeks later, the house on Hillcrest Lane no longer stood as a place of sorrow. Amara donated it to a children's foundation, one that cared for kids with disabilities, the ones the world too often forgets. The old rooms were repainted, filled with laughter and bright colors. The locked door was removed completely, replaced with a wide archway of light. Amara visited once more before leaving town. She walked through the hall, fingers brushing the smooth walls. The air was different now, lighter. She placed the Bible on the windowsill, the rusted key resting on top. "This house doesn't hide secrets anymore," she whispered. "It shelters love." Outside, the laughter of children carried through the open window, blending with the wind and sunlight. And for the first time in her life, Amara smiled without pain. The house on Hillcrest Lane stood quiet once more, but it was no longer a house of sorrow. Soft sunlight streamed through the open windows, flooding the hallway that had once been filled with shadows. Dust danced like tiny golden stars, moving freely through the air, where silence used to suffocate. The forbidden door, once locked tight for decades, now hung open, its wood catching the morning light. No fear lived behind it anymore, only peace. The nursery was almost unrecognizable. Fresh paint covered the walls, the old crib replaced by shelves of books and toys. A vase of wildflowers sat where the chest once stood, bright and full of life. On the windowsill, where Amara had left them, rested the Bible and the key. The Bible's pages stirred softly in the breeze, as though still breathing the prayers her mother once whispered through tears. The key glimmered faintly in the sun, a small piece of rusted metal that had once held generations of pain. Now it held only meaning. Outside, laughter echoed. The new caretakers of the shelter were playing with children in the garden, their voices rising like music. Amara stood by the gate, watching quietly. She no longer felt the ache in her chest that had followed her since childhood. Only warmth, only peace, she whispered, almost to herself. Some doors aren't locked to hide shame, but to protect love until it's ready to be understood. Her words lingered in the breeze, wrapping around the old house one last time. As she turned to leave, sunlight fell across the open doorway. The house seemed to glow from within, alive, free, forgiven, and for a brief, tender moment, Amara thought she heard it again. That soft, innocent laughter, echoing faintly from somewhere beyond the light. Naomi's laughter. The past had not vanished. It had simply been set free.